Hello, today's Bible study comes from Ephesians chapter 5, and we'll be going through and reviewing verses 3 through 7, and it reads as follows. But among you there must not be even a hint of sexual immorality or any kind of impurity or of greed, because these are improper for God's holy people. Nor should there be obscenity, foolish talk, or coarse joke which are out of place, but rather thanksgiving. For of this you can be sure, no immoral, impure, or greedy person, such a person is an idolater, have any inheritance in the kingdom of Christ and God. Let no one deceive you with empty words, for because of such things God's wrath comes on those who are disobedient. Therefore, do not be partners with them. Amen. So he starts off, and now there's some dilemmas. There's some things that are opposites. And Paul says here, let it not even be named among you. And Paul is telling all these sexual things, these things that go against God, that they're not fitting. They're not right for saints, God's holy people. And it shouldn't even be among God's people. And you notice Paul was speaking in the flesh very heavily here. He went from fornication and uncleanliness to filthiness to coarse jesting. He had covetousness, foolish talk. But first, look at what he puts out there for a sexual thing. Fornication, which is, we know, sex before marriage. It is a sexual sin. It's against somebody else's flesh also. Uncleanliness. And uncleanliness we may derive as being uh, our hygiene and upcoming, but it's speaking to our moral behavior here. And of course, the sexual nature is a big thing. He speaks to our moral behavior here. Filthiness, which is that uncleanliness also, and coarse jesting, um, and that's just bad, bad humor, more pronounced as sexual humor. Um, and he says, as as is fitting for saints. Wow. When you think about this, the fact that Paul was punching this sexual sin in the face, and he's talking about it here heavily, he's telling you that he's not telling you these things to avoid, to be something. He is telling you you are a saint now and act like a saint. Okay? There's gonna be this in the world. There's gonna be that appeal, that warning, and all these things, but remember, we are saints. So he is emphasizing this situation here. And remember, at this time, if you remember about the city of Ephesus, and you can see it throughout, it was a heavy sexually immoral area. And Paul is telling them this ain't right for God's holy people. It was something that may have been approved in man's culture there, in their situation there, but for God's people, Paul was saying this is not of God. This is not God's way. The covetousness and the foolish talking, that comes hand in hand with sexual sin. We say things we don't mean. We say things that we do mean. We say things that are erotically supposed to stimulate and We say things that are degrading to get into a more carnal act of what we shouldn't be doing. And Paul speaks on this. And he's saying, don't go there. Really, he's really just saying, don't go there. He tells you, but rather give thanks. He says, the Christian, us, should be giving thanks. And what are you giving thanks for? And honestly, he tells you it's for sex. Give thanks for the sex. We get it as a gift. It is not to be the sinful sex. It is to be the way the Lord intended for us to have sex. Okay? And that type glorifies the Lord because he intended it for a reason and a purpose. We have overindulged, myself included. Amen. The Lord changes things, but we have overindulged it sometimes in this world. And Paul is saying, that's not what it's for. It is a gift from God. Understand it and make sure that it glorifies God. And he tells you when he wants you to do it. He says they are not fitting, but rather giving of thanks. This is what he says. And God's purpose for it wasn't for me to just do what I want to do. It was actually to bring a husband and wife together to become one and to create. But we have to remember that. So these things that Paul speaks of go against what God intended sex for. And I'm glad Paul speaks to it because, hey, I needed to know. A bunch of us need to know. So then he says, has any inheritance in the kingdom of Christ and God. But before I get to that, look at 5. It says, for this you know that no fornicator, unclean person, or covetous man who is an idolater has any inheritance in the kingdom of Christ and God. And I needed to put all that together. So everybody that was mentioned up above, going through verse 3 and part of 4, there's no inheritance for them. We are supposed to be changed. We are supposed to be as holy people. And we can't keep doing those things. And constantly, whatever you want to do, call it on it when you want to. He says you can't keep doing these things. And he says a covetous man who is an idolater. Now he said a covetous man is an idolater. And a covetous man, what is he doing? He's putting something in front of something. He wants something more than he wants God. That puts an idol, an image, a thing, anything that goes before God makes him an idolater. And this right here is the physical body that they crave. Let no one deceive you with empty words. Okay, so empty words can't come up on you and make an excuse for it or say no. It can't stop his call. It doesn't do anything like that for these situations. And he says, hey, there's going to be a wrath coming. The wrath of God is going to come. And it's going to be because of our disobedience. It's always because of our disobedience. And then it tells you, therefore, do not be partakers with them. So Paul is telling them in this area of high sexual immorality, don't get caught up, is what he's pretty much saying. You know, they're in this situation. Don't be into the fornication, uncleanliness, or the uncovetousness. Don't get in any things. And truthfully, don't even partake with them who are. In other words, fight the flesh. Make the Lord the most important thing, is what he's saying. Don't put anything above God. And those actions of sex are what God said goes against what he created it for. And remember, it is a gift from him, but they are using it in a way that does not glorify God. Amen.